All right. Hello, everybody. Today we have an expert here, our expert sexpert, Marla Stewart. Hi, Marla.
Hey, Ashley, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming. And so, Marla, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a sex educator, but for those who don't know, you tell us a little about yourself, your background, all that stuff.
Sure. So, I am a sexologist, an award winning sexologist and educator. I am a sexual strategist, and that with my company, Velvet Lips, which helps to educate and empower individuals and folks in relationships or, around sexuality, particularly around seduction, communication, and sex skills. As a sexual strategist, I use techniques such as sex therapeutic techniques, somatic bodywork techniques, as well as comprehensive sex ed to sort of triangulate the need that they have for whatever issue that they might be coming to me with. And in addition to that, my background is, or my specialties again, are in seduction, communication, sex skills, but also kink and BDSM, alternative sexual communities, which include kinksters, non-monogamous, swingers, all sorts of folks, in that realm, as well as HIV and public health are in my wheelhouse, and LGBTQIA2S plus, identities. So those are all the people and the folks that I tend to run with.
All right. So, question. So, what have you seen as, because you have a variety of people that you serve. So, what have you seen people like the changes they're going through in their life, and how has some of their changes affected their sex life, good or bad? What type of changes have you
Yeah, I
seen?
think some of the things that affect their sex life, a lot of the changes that I personally see have been like sex after marriage.
Same.
Or sex in a long-term relationship. So they've been together 20 plus years and are still trying to figure out like what the hell is going on or what happened. So with sort of newer relationships, it's really sometimes about in my experience, especially being in the South, like I'm from California, but I moved to the South for graduate school. I moved to Atlanta. And so what I found was that there were a whole lot of people dealing with religious trauma. And so they were getting married. And so I would have a lot of couples who were, Muslim clients or Christian clients who were having this trouble adjusting from a sort of purity mindset to like a freak in the sheets. And
Yes.
so really needed some help to manage those two, right? To sort of evolve into, the lover that they want to be. I've been dealing with those are the kind of clients that I personally see around sort of those particular adjustments. And then for long-term relationships, it really comes down to communication and reprioritizing their sex life and being kind to one another. And so research shows you be kind to the person, you prioritize your sex life, you're going to have a long-lasting relationship. Well, they get to 20 years and then they're like, I want to do some more freaky shit. I want to do
Yeah.
something else. And so a lot of times I get those clients who have been in relationships 20 years, 25 years, who are just like, okay, let's do something kinky. I saw 50 Shades of Grey and now I want to try something. So those are typically the clients that I get.
And so a couple of things. So one, probably know or don't know, I'm from the South. And so I grew up in purity culture. So I've seen like, my little background is I was a part of a purity cult for several years. Um,
Mm.
yeah, oh yeah. So I was a part of a purity cult in my 20s. I came out of it like 28, 29. And yeah, so now I went from one extreme to the next, whatever.
Right.
But anyway, so like I see a lot of people who we were functioning as this, we only have sex with one person, and this is like our body is identity is our value, and going from that mindset to going to a different mindset even after marriage. Like people think just because you're married that mindset leaves. It does not. It follows you even into marriage. So
Hmm.
I can relate to that. And then I want to talk about sex after marriage, because that's an interesting topic, because I hear a lot of people, men mostly, I think, and you can tell me who the gender of the people that you hear from, but men mostly, from people that I've talked to, they are the ones who complain the most. I've seen about sex after marriage. They say, and this is just what I heard. I'm not a man, so whatever. But they say that how before they got married, they were having all the sex they wanted. They were doing all the freaky things or whatever, and they was having sex, 2 times a day if that's what they wanted, right? And then they get married, and somehow things shift. Now, there's a lot of reason why things shift, because things people sometimes have children and life happens.
Right.
And when you move in with somebody, the excitement of it kind of dies down. It's not as exciting anymore once I see you every day and I wake up to you and your breath stings and I see all the things, right?
Right.
But that is a thing. That is a thing. Why do you think that sex after marriage changes so drastically?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily like sex right after marriage, but it's soon enough, right? So once you start getting into longer term relationships, like, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, that's when things start to fade. And unfortunately, I think a lot of it has to do with not, honestly, I see like the lack of maybe premarital counseling. So not handling things before they get married. And then those things, you're having a good time. All the dopamine is hitting you. You got rose colored lenses on, rose colored glasses, and you're like, oh, I'm having a good time. And those things that like you see may not be as prevalent until you get married, right? Because then you're combining finances. You need to come together on if you want to have children or not, or, if you already do have children, or how you want to discipline your children, or how you want to educate your children, or even how to negotiate maybe your career or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of other things that people don't handle beforehand that I say in premarital counseling that would tremendously help them be better lovers after they get married.
So who should people get premarital counseling from? Because a lot of people get premarital counseling from their pastor. Yes. And I'm a firm believer in I think you should get counseling from people with counseling degrees and backgrounds. This is my personal opinion. And your pastor has good insight on how to live, from a spiritual standpoint, but not all pastors you need to be getting marital advice from because some of their marriages are trash.
Hmm.
So who do you suggest people get premarital advice from? I'm saying from.
I really think this is a hard one. I had a client that got premarital. I suggested getting premarital like counseling from me or premarital coaching from me. And, they went to me for a bit, but they ended up going to see their pastor for the majority of that to kind of, and I get it, to solidify their marriage in their religion. And I know that's super important for people. And so, but I'm also a little wary about it because it's sort of like, they want you to maybe stay in relationships that might not be healthy, or they just don't see the other aspects of it, especially with regards to sex. They just kind of like sex, you do it, instead of thinking about sex as something you should be curious about and something you want to do to explore, something that should be fun and pleasurable, as opposed to being dutiful or, being the good wife that you need to be. And so there's advantages and disadvantages, right? So I would say the advantages of going to someone like your pastor would be that you're solidifying your root in your religion and that feels good to you and it feels solid. I also think if you can get some outside of your religion, just because like the couple that I had that did the premarital counseling, if I would have kept going with them both, I probably would have been able to stop some of the behavior that was happening, or help identify some of the behavior so they would not have gotten married, right?
Okay.
Because there were a lot of things that I was seeing that I was like, okay, well, let's try to fix this way, because before you get married, this is something that you don't want to get married and going into something like this. And, it really, I think he just really, in my opinion, I think he really just didn't want to marry her. He ended up having many affairs, he had cheated on her many times, got married. She knew she was cheating on her, they got married. She ended up contracting herpes from him because, he was continually going outside the relationship as they got married. And then, they're having a child together, it's sort of like, and you're just kind of like, okay, what's happening here? Right. And
Right.
so, that's something that what is the pastor going to say? And are they even going to say anything to their pastor about like, hey, my husband I contracted herpes from my husband and now we want to have this child. And now I'm not really sure. How do I trust him? How do I not? So there's just like some things that I, as a coach, as an educator, as a sexual strategist would say like, hey, I think this is something you should really think twice about or talk to somebody else about, because, I think it's going to be important to navigate in the future.
Well, let me put my seat just went down. Hold on a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. All right, cool. We'll edit that out the video. one of the things you said is that you have found that people in long-term relationships, after several years, typically one wants to explore more and the other one does not. And I get a lot of those questions too. So what is your expert advice on that? And so and to back it up. So do you feel as though that sometimes, because I found this too, but typically I ask people, well, the person before you marry them, are they into these things from the beginning? Typically, well,
Right.
that's a good question. That's a question I ask,
Yes.
and typically the question is no. Typically, it's like
Right.
no, they were very vanilla when I met them. Okay, fine. So then I asked, well, if you knew that they were vanilla and you were not so vanilla, why why did you,
Deal with
why did
it. How did you go
yeah,
through with it?
yeah,
Yeah.
why did you go through with it? And people have different reasons for why they do
Fear
things,
of
but
being alone,
yes.
fear
Or
of, yeah.
yeah, or they were a good person. I think they would be a good wife, spouse, whatever. They're a good
They're
father, good.
sacrificing the 20% because they got the
Yes.
80%.
Yes. And so now you're in this thing, this marriage, and you're not really satisfied sexually. So what is your expert advice for situations like those?
Yeah, I think part of it too is people being real with themselves, right? And understanding their own personal desires, right? So it's sort of like when I got into my marriage, right? I was like, hey, I'm kinky. I'm this is what I like. I'm non-monogamous. You like me or you don't like me, and we can go from there. And, I accepted her for who she is, right? Like she's very vanilla, very, and we just had to be like, okay, well, when I'm in a kinky space, these are the things that I'm going to do.
Hmm.
And I was happy in the sense of she was like, I will take pictures or I will be there, like I will do that, but I'm not doing all that. You know what I mean? And so I think really having those discussions ahead of time and understanding your own desires, really being upfront and honest with yourself, like, hey, I'm not really kinky, but maybe I could get into it. But if I don't happen to be kinky, I don't want to stop you from being kinky, right? Or if you really love, recording our sexual sessions, maybe I'll get tired of it, but maybe, you can record some solo performances or something like that. Or, maybe we can go to a swingers club and you can be an exhibitionist that way, or whatever the case may be, really understanding and try to be accommodating to your lover. But honestly, I think being open is sort of the best way to be, and just try the things, because you might be pleasantly surprised about trying the things. I'm always an advocate of saying yes. A lot of times people are like, no, I don't think I'd like that. I'm be like, yeah, no, I didn't think I liked that. But then, this person made it sound really good. I was
Yes.
doing a race and kink talk with Luna, and we were talking to, oh my gosh, I forgot her name, but she loves chocolate cake. So she does like the splashing thing, and she just puts chocolate cake all over her body. And the way she was talking about it I had never thought about smearing chocolate cake on my body before. And the way she was talking about it, I was like,
You know what?
she made me want to smear chocolate cake on my body. Like, it seems that sexy. I haven't tried it yet, but you know what I mean? It like opened those doors to explore. And I think when we stop ourselves, when we're not open, when we don't take accountability, or not accountability, but we don't take into account of our lover's desires, I think that can be really stagnating for a relationship.
Right. But I also think that the issue is a lot of people, they don't maybe feel safe enough, or don't. It also has to be trust within your relationship for me to feel safe and open enough for me to allow certain things or be willing to do certain things. I tell people, if there is like already like trust issues or some type of dishonesty, probably being poly is probably not the way I want to go. I'll say, like people, because even when you have open relationships, and it's different types of open relationships, it has to be a level of trust there. Like I have to be able to trust you. Now, jealousy is a natural human emotion, so that's going to come, and you can talk through it. But at the end of the day, I have to be able to trust that whatever rules that we have in play, or whatever rules that we set as a couple, that these are the rules that you're going to abide by, and you're not going to be out here on solo missions.
Yeah, yeah. And what you said earlier just kind of triggered me around like thinking, not triggered me, but triggered a thought in my head around like how religion can have a deep hold on people, right? And prevent them from exploration, prevent them from going outside the bounds because they've been trained to stay in the box. And so it's such a mental hurdle to go outside of that box that can really hurt your relationship. And so yeah.
So let's talk about the seduction learning styles. So what are those? And then how can people implement those, and how can they help people after certain life changes in their sex life?
Yeah, absolutely. So seduction learning styles are my sexual theory that I came up with. I got inspired by the Art of Seduction, Robert Greene's Art of Seduction. And I was thinking about the learning styles and I was just like, oh my God, this is totally goes together. And so when thinking about how we connect, and honestly, it is around seduction, but really, honestly, it's about communication. So it's how we communicate with one another that really can deeply affect someone. There's three seduction learning styles include visual, auditory, and tactile, right? Or kinesthetic. There's also gustatory and olfactory seduction, but when it comes to sort of the senses, the visual, auditory, and the tactile ones are going to be the most prominent. And so when we think about the seduction learning styles, we think about it in a sense of how someone is communicate with someone, right? So if I know you're visual, which I'm pretty sure you're probably visual because of your glasses. Typically people, one of my visual hacks, right, is like people who love lots of jewelry, colored hair, funky glasses are typically visual people because they're looking at themselves in the mirror every day and they're like, I gotta make sure like the way they look. And not to say other people don't do that, but particularly visual people do that the most. So with visual, so again, visual people, there's a way of being seduced, right? So when we think about, sorry, I'm sort of thinking, I'm going to make sure I don't miss anything.
You're good.
When we think about
Because we can edit this
visual
video, so you're
seduction,
fine.
you said what?
We can edit this video. You're good.
Okay.
You're fine. It's
I'm
not
thinking
live.
about making lots of eye contact, right? Lots of eye contact is really great for visual seduction. When we clean up the clutter, so when you go to a space and there's like shit everywhere, you're gonna be distracted if you're visual. So if you want to seduce someone who's visual, you want to make sure you clean up the clutter, that everything is in its right place, right? So that you're not distracted by everything. You want them to be distracted by you, not by the fucking clothes on your floor or the shit that's out of place. Telling stories rich in detail, right? So making sure you're going through a vibrant story. These are my imagination people. These are the people who visualize. So they need to see those specific details. Dress impeccably, like making sure you're dressed well. And of course, moving, like being the opposite of the room. So if a room is sitting still, then you want to be moving around the room. Or if the room is busy, you want to be either staying still or moving very slowly. You want to be the opposite of the room. When it comes to auditory seduction, it's different, right? Auditory people, you'll know an auditory person because they'll go, I love a good conversation, which basically means that I love to hear myself talk, right? And so, so when you need to ask them questions, give them feedback, really talking with them, giving them those questions so they have the opportunity to talk more, expanding your vocabulary, coming up with words that they don't know or they are curious about, words with multiple syllables, but even the way you talk, right? Low, soft, deep tones, making sure they hang on every single word, right? Like that is what you want to do for auditory people. They're like anticipating to hear, right? Music, playing their favorite music, moans, breathy tones, all of those things are going to help with auditory seduction. When it comes to tactile, these are like my athletes. These are the people who love to be physical. They're always like, I like to do things with my hands, right? Using different points of pressure, dancing with them, right? Playing with fabric. A lot of times we wear cotton all the time. So thinking about the types of fabric that that you have on your body and having them want to touch it, right? Maybe it's velvet or lace or leather or silk or whatever. Use their hands, right? Grabbing their hands or grabbing parts of their bodies to have you touch theirs, that's going to be helpful. And then like creating sexual tension with like push and pull movements. So those are typically the ways, visual, auditory, tactile people get seduced. And of course, like I said, there's olfactory, which is seduction by smell, and then gustatory is seduction by taste. So, So yeah, like really being able to connect with your lover makes it's huge. So I had this couple, they've been together 40 years, and this
Jeez.
woman was like, "My husband doesn't listen to me. I don't know, I can't get him to listen to me. He doesn't know it." And I said, "You know what?" I said, "You're probably not doing the right thing. You're probably just talking to him and he's probably just like hearing blah 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 blah." I said, "What you need to do is I bet you just touch him. When you have a question, you want to say something important, touch him on his arm and then say the thing." And she did that. And she's like, "Holy cow." She's like, "I cannot believe that that worked." She's like, "He finally listened to me. I've been trying to get him to listen to me for 40 years. You gave me one thing to do to help me connect and help him listen. And finally he listened to me." And I was like, exactly. You just weren't communicating with him in the way that he needs to hear, the way that he needs to communicate.
So
And
question.
so,
So is there like a quiz or test that people can take to understand that? Because sometimes we don't know ourselves sometimes. So learning
mhm.
that, and then we can do it with our partners so we can learn them, so that way we can know how to communicate. So where is the quiz and stuff?
Yeah, the quiz is, you can just go on my website, velvetlipssexed.com/quiz, and you can take that quiz. And in addition, I also have a free class. So if you want to learn more, my free Arts and Science of Seduction class, it's free. It's on my website. Just go to velvetlipssexed.com/shop, and you can take that class for free.
Yeah, that's good.
And I talk about planting sex seeds, talk about the section, how to create an erotic plan, like all of those things.
That's good. So our FYI, I'll edit this part out, but the name of this episode is going to be "Sex After Marriage" because that came to while we're talking.
Hmm.
And I think all of these tips are very good for people who've been married for a long time and trying to figure
Hmm.
out how to navigate that. So okay, great. So the next question. So how would you tell someone, or what tips would you give someone if I think we asked this question, but I can't remember what your answer was. So if I asked it, just tell me. So if someone is less kinkier than their spouse, how would they get their spouse on board with their level of kink?
Yeah, so it's a really great question, because honestly, you really need to be able to connect with your lover, right? And the first part of that is, I believe, the seduction learning styles and that communication piece. So one of the things that you can do is you can say if your lover is visual, right? So you took the quiz or you took my class and you're like,
Okay.
"Oh, my person is visual," or
Okay.
whatever. And so if they're visual, just, what you might want to do is like have dinner and have a conversation and really emphasize, like, look them in their eyes and really tell them what makes you excited about it. So you do this two ways, I
Okay.
say, and this probably could go actually for anybody, whatever learning style you have. But number one is, I definitely believe you should use positive reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if they have nice hands, you could say something along the lines of like, "Oh my God, I love your hands. I believe they're so beautiful, and like you really take care of them. And I think it would be really sexy, grabbed my butt more or spanked me with those hands. Cause
That's a good
you're
tip.
nice and strong too. Like I want to know what that feels like." So you're really, feeding into their ego, but you're also helping them understand. So if they were visual, you could say something along the lines like, "Can you imagine like your hand just like coming back and then, hitting me, and then like, what that would feel like on my skin? I wonder," whatever the things is, you really want to like use the storytelling aspect to gain curiosity. And with auditory, again, those low, soft, deep tones, right? So you'd be like, "I have a question for you." Right? Let them hang on the words. Like, "We've been thinking about," or you could say something along the lines of, "My friend such and such, said they did this with their lover and their sex life has been, amazing ever since. Like, what do you think about that?" Something along those lines of just really kind of, you could say "my friend," you could say "I want to explore." Like if you're not comfortable saying like "I want to explore," I think going the "my friend" route, or "I saw this news article," or "I saw like something," and get the conversation going. You just really want to get them talking. If you come at them, so you have to remember too, it's the way you come at them. Because I always say better communication, better answers, bitter communication, bitter answers, right?
Mm.
So your energy is always going to be able to match someone. So when you say whatever it is you want to say, you got to say it nicely. You got to say it sweetly. You got to say it lovingly, because that's the answer they're going to get from you. If you're saying like, well, I don't think you would like this, or whatever, you have an attitude, like you're just going to get an attitude back. So really being able to understand like how someone else can match your energy is going to be important when you're talking about embracing something new in your sexual life.
That's good. That's really good advice. I do tell people you should always. I learned this from being a teacher. I was a teacher many years ago, and they always would tell us when we were trying to get the students to do something different or better improve something. You start with what they're doing well. You're like, you're really doing, your multiplication facts. You're doing that really well. Let's work on division. You start off with something that they're doing well, a compliment before you go in for the jugular. You don't start off with the because then people stop listening,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
You want your person to hear you, and you want them to. It's also sometimes not what you say, is how you say it. So saying stuff
Exactly.
nice and sweet and pleasant matters. Sometimes
Hmm.
we as women, sometimes we could need to improve that area. Sometimes we're not as pleasant as we can be, and sometimes that is the reason why we're getting the result that we're getting. So those are all very good tips.
And I
How
think
can
that works well with the after sex, right? Like if you're displeased with something sexually, I think the compliment sandwich or whatever they call it, like, I think can really help you, not maybe after, like directly after the moment, but maybe the day after, really doing the compliment sandwich to talk about something you're dissatisfied about.
So talk about that right quick. Talk about when is the appropriate time. If you're not enjoying something, when is the appropriate time to bring it up to your partner?
It depends on what it is. So for instance, like if you are uncomfortable in the moment and if something's happening and you're uncomfortable, you could just say like, hey, this isn't working for me right now. Like let's switch it up. Or you could just say like, I want to switch it up. I want to do something different. You don't necessarily have to frame it as like, this isn't feeling good to me. You could just say like, ooh, I want to try something new. Or you could say like, hey, this is a little bit painful for me. Like I want to do, let's try this. I think this would be better. But I think if it's something in the moment that could be improved, you need to say it in that moment, right?
Okay.
Now, if you do the thing and sex is great, but maybe it lasted 2 minutes, right? Maybe it was very short. You could say something, then I would say something the next day, right? So it would be like afterwards, whatever you do for your sex aftercare. So maybe that's cuddling or talking. When you're cuddling, talking, or, doing the emotional piece, you just mention the positive things, like what went well, that like maybe you really loved to kiss them. Maybe the kissing was great. Maybe you loved when they touched all over your body, mentioning those things. And then I say 24 hours, give it 24 hours to just be like, okay, hey, I was reflecting on yesterday and, I love the fact that we made out for so long and the massage was amazing. But I was wondering because, you didn't last as long, maybe there's something we can do, or maybe we can try this for foreplay. Come with ideas though. Don't just be
Yes.
like, you suck, or that 2 minutes
Right.
was trash.
Right.
Like that is going to be
That's not
horrible,
helpful.
right?
That's not
Yeah,
helpful.
that is not productive. And remember, research says being kind to our lovers is the way for longevity. So as long as we're being kind around what we're saying, we could say the things, but we just got to say it in ways that will protect them and just get them to understand that like, hey, we can improve this and we can do this together.
Right. That's really good advice. Okay, so Marla, tell people where they can find you, where they can again, where they can get the seductions, learning styles test, information, quizzes, and all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at Velvet Lips Sex Ed. If you're looking to explore more, be curious about a variety of educational aspects and pleasure and fun and joy, I highly recommend going to sexdownsouth.com, checking out that website and seeing if it's a fit for you. And I'm happy to give your listeners a discount code, so I can put that like in your show notes if they want to
Yeah,
attend SDS Con.
you can just you can text it to me and I'll put it in the show notes. And let me say I've been at Sex Down South the last 3 or 4 years, one of those, and I love it. Sex Down South is if you're someone who's been to a conference, like a sex ed conference, typically sex ed conferences tend to be very white. And so this one is not. It's very for us biased. It's not your typical conference where you go to and you just have like people talking to you, right? Like it's like a it's so it has that. So it has classes you can attend, but it also has like the hands-on thing, a participation. It's like a participation conference, and you get to learn. It's like the best of both worlds. So if that's what it is, the best of both worlds. And so it's a great place for you to come and just learn about things if you're not sure if something's for you. South South is the I still have to say because South South is the perfect place for you to go and to learn and to see if kink is covers a whole wide different things. It's just not one thing, but to learn if some of those things are for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So find us on Instagram at SDSCon. And it's a really good time. We have a healing space. We have on-call therapists for emotional support. We have a dungeon. We have lots of workshops, fun games like lube wrestling and
Yeah,
kink
yeah.
games and all sorts of just fun stuff.
And what I like about this year was, and y'all might have did this last year too, I don't remember, but this year they had a nudist parade. Did y'all have that last
Yeah.
year?
Uh-huh. Yeah. The naked parade. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was so cool. I didn't do it, but I thought that was so cool. I was at a vendor table, so I'm like, I can't do this. But I thought it was so cool because one of the things that I love about being in nudist communities and doing nudist things is you learn to appreciate and love your body. A lot of times people feel they lack a lot of self-confidence when it comes to how they look naked, and that carryovers into their sex life. But when you can appreciate how you look for right now, yes, I have rolls today, yes, and we can work on those, right? We can work on that, and we can get to the size that I would like to be. But today, right now, right, I love my body today, and that also helps you. I feel like being confident in who you are today helps you with having great sex with the lights on or off, but with the lights on.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to keep it going for sure.
So thank you, Marla. Thank you for being on Sex After. And hold on, let's
Thank you
see.
so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.